Great. I'd like to call the MWPA Board regular meeting of November 18th, 2021 to order. Allison, will you please ensure that we have a quorum?
Biomass Fire District,
Present.
City of Mill Valley.
Here.
City of San Rafael.
Here.
City of Larkspur.
Here.
County of Marin.
Here.
Inverness Fire District.
Here.
Kentfield Fire District. Kentfield Fire District. Marinwood Community Services District.
Here.
Novato Fire District.
Here.
I apologize, I missed Muir Beach Community Services District.
Here.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District.
Here.
Southern Marin Fire District.
Here.
Stinson Beach Fire District.
Here.
Town of Corte Madera.
Here.
Town of Fairfax. Town of Fairfax. Town of Ross.
Barbara did let us know that she might be a little bit late.
Ross is here.
Thank you. Town of San Anselmo.
Here.
A quorum is present with 94% of the membership.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks all for attending. Item number 3, enter any request to adjust the order of the agenda. And I am seeing none. Let's move on to open time for public expression. At this time, the public's welcome to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda and that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to government code, the board is not permitted to discuss or take any action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments should be no more than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. And I'd ask all please to silence your phones during the meeting and mute your mic when you're not reporting out. So thanks very much. Allison.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thanks all. Let's move on to Mark Brown, item 5, the executive officer's report. Mark Brown, please.
Good afternoon, President Goins, board members. I am going to do a quick screen share with a PowerPoint for the executive officer's report. As long as technology cooperates with me. So if someone can give me a thumbs up that they are seeing my slides, that'd be great. Perfect, thank you. So well, the topic that we had before we started recording and the one that's been going on quite frequently is rain and what does it mean? And feel like a broken record sometimes. I've talked a lot about rain lately, and but especially after we had that historic volume of rain. And what does that mean? And fortunately, after that historic volume of rain, that we've had some good intervals of healthy rain at healthy intervals after that. But one thing I want to point out about that first bolus of rain, that after so many inches in that short amount of time, the rest of it really has very little impact on our wildland fire fuels. The fuels can only absorb the energy or the water so fast. So a lot of that rain, even though it was 12 inches or even more in some places, it's not like 12 inches over a period of a month. And also the important thing to remember is that we had a drought, one rain year, and then a drought. And the fuels take years to get into the dry state that they've been in. And it takes more than one rain season for the heavy and the medium fuels to be back to normal. So historically, after we have a drought busting rain year, we have a critical fire season. And that's because that rain year allows for the growth of a lot more fine fuels. But the medium and heavy fuels haven't been able to catch up moisture wise. And now we have the kindling, the fine fuels that can get the medium and the heavy fuels going. So that's part of our messaging that we are going to be providing to the public. The other part is we stopped calling it fire season in most areas, and we're calling it how we are staffing. So we are going from peak staffing to winter preparedness staffing. And I think that's a good mindset for the public. Let's have the public think about the winter as winter preparedness, because spring and summer is going to come right around the corner. And there's a lot of work that could be done during the winter, whether it's limbing up their trees, replacing some of their garden. Maybe they want to replace some of the plants they've had that take a lot of water, and they can go to drought resistant and fire resistant planting. The winter time is the perfect time to do that. So again, we'll be using the winter and our voice that we have through Fire Safe Marin, through each of our member agencies, and through correspondence in the newspaper and stuff to really reinforce that message. Our website, I really am pleased with the launch of our website. We received a lot of positive comments, and unfortunately, we didn't have the analytic data from the website before we started our new website. But since our new website started, I have turned on the analytics, and we're averaging about 100 or more visits a day. And we are going to be able to start looking at those and see where people are coming from, and then how long they're going to stay there. They stay on our website, where they stay on our website, and then we can use that to help refine our continued messaging. Did want to let you know that our Citizens Oversight Committee recruitment is going well. We were in Sunday's newspaper with an ad for the IJ. We're in either this week's or next week's Point Reyes Light, since we're doing a West Marin recruitment. And a lot of our member agencies have been helping send that information out. And so we do have applications rolling in, and we'll be looking to convene the ad hoc recruitment selection subcommittee together so we can make a report to the full board next meeting. Speaking of reports, the annual report is out. I have hard copies, and I'm in the process of getting those hard copies delivered to each of the board members, one each, and then a copy to each of the member agencies. We purposely went light on the number of printings to both keep costs down and also just not waste paper, because quite frankly, I think you guys would agree with me. If you print too many of those reports, they just end up either in the recycle bin or sitting on someone's cabinet that never gets pulled out. So we really wanted to keep the hard copies down to a minimum and really use soft copies for that. The Strategic Ad Hoc Subcommittee has had 3 meetings so far. They have been very valuable, and actually we'll have I won't touch much on it now because we're going to have a full report on it later in today's meeting. Our partnerships continue to go very well. We had that shared walk with the One-Tam and fire agencies out at the Woodward Fire at the Point Reyes National Seashore. Great walk, great time, lots of valuable information about the fire and what is happening after the fire. But I think it was just as important that we had everyone together walking through nature and actually talking and bonding and creating relationships. Our North Bay Watershed Association relationship continues to go well. We are looking to partner with a joint campaign with them, and we're still framing the name and how it's going to be delivered, but we're looking at fire smart and drought smart landscaping can be the same and help with that. And if I remember the 70s drought, and now that's when a lot of people put drought resistant juniper in their yards. And now we're spending lots of time removing that drought resistant juniper. So let's not repeat that same paradigm. And the good bit news is the North Bay Watershed Association has the funding for that campaign, and the funding will be running through the North Bay Watershed Association. I wanted to bring up the Marin Biomass Recovery Project. Bruce really has been taking the lead on this. It's working with MWPA, ESP, Drawdown, and Zero Waste Marin to get a grant from the OPR from the state of California to look at how we are dealing with our biomass and see if we can how we can increase the use of the biomass here in Marin for good purposes rather than shipping them all over the place. And I did want to bring up Drawdown Marin. They're restructuring and they're looking for a board of directors. So I know all of you have so much extra time, but they did ask if I would give a shout out to them that they are looking for board members. And then the last thing I'll talk about today is the prescribed fire panel. Several of you were there 2 days ago. Big shout out to Maria Schmidt, who facilitated it for us. We feel that she did a phenomenal job, and a huge shout out to the 6 panelists that we had. Excellent speakers, great content. I thought the panel had a really good flow to it, and great Q&A session afterwards. Maria is going to be working with our communication specialist to create a little news article about it. And we will post that news article on our website with a link to the video. And ESP will also be sharing a report about that, since it was ESP that hosted the panel, and we just supported them with that. And they'll be sharing the video as well. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Excellent report. So questions from the board? Any questions? And I am seeing people just shaking their heads yes and smiling. Mark, thank you so much.
We do have a hand raised by Director White.
Oh, Mark White, I see you in the bottom corner here. And Mark, you're muted, Mark. Mark, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So
Okay.
Mark, I just want to get an idea of what drawdown marin is again.
Pardon me, I didn't hear the question.
Drawdown Marin. Who was Drawdown Marin?
Who is it?
Good point.
Drawdown Marin is working on drawing down our greenhouse gas emissions.
And I believe it's maybe Dennis can clarify, but it is a Board of Supervisors. This a committee associated with the board, officially commissioned, is that correct?
Bruce, I missed that question, sorry.
Drawdown, just identifying who Drawdown Marin is and who they're associated with.
So Drawdown Marin started at the County of Marin, addressing climate change issues internally. And now it's gone out to be a nonprofit in the county to do the same function from a much broader perspective, hopefully of generating outside funds to support it along with public funds. So.
Great, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Dennis. Other questions for Mark? Okay, seeing none, let's take public comment, please, on this item. Allison?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Back to the board for any further discussion on all this great work that's going on. And I'm seeing none. Thanks. Mark, thank you so much for all this going on. Let's move to item number 6, which is the consent calendar. The opportunity for the public to comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion. The board may approve the entire consent calendar in one action, or in an alternative, items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board member or staff member for separate discussion and a vote. So let's first go to the public, please. Public comment on the consent calendar items.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public. Oh, I apologize. We'll hear from Carolyn Longstreth.
Carolyn?
Yes, do you hear me?
Welcome. Welcome, Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks. And hello, everybody. You should have received a memo from Fern today, and I'm sorry that we didn't get it to you sooner, but you know how it is. But the memo does cover the concerns we identified about the 2 veg management projects that are before you in this consent calendar. And we urge you to give staff an opportunity to modify the projects to address the issues that we raised on wetlands. There's, very little information on what they're doing there. Cutting of manzanitas we're concerned about, and the timing of the Mount Tam project. But I want to spend most of my time on the exemptions and the points we made on that. And I know we're kind of raining on the parade here, and we do support this Ridgecrest project, especially the invasive plant removal. But we would submit that more care needs to be taken to support the applications of these exemptions. Regarding the Class 4 defensible space exemption, it doesn't really do any good that state parks also filed an NOE, a notice of exemption. You can't assume that it's valid. There's no procedure where some authority accepts or rejects an NOE. You just file it and hope for the best. hope nobody challenges it, I guess is what I mean. But actually, in addition to that, the state parks also didn't present any facts or analysis. They're relying on the defensible space exemption too, and they don't add anything to justify going beyond the 100-foot limit. We would add that the exemption for defensible space appears to be a bright line rule in that it says this exemption applies, and then it states the two distances, 30 feet and 100 from structures. Now, there may really be good reasons to go beyond 100 feet from a fire protection standpoint, but that doesn't mean it's exempt. It would just mean you would have to file a negative declaration, a little more involved CEQA document. And the second exemption is the class 1 for existing facilities. This might be easier for you all to support, but it wasn't done here. The issue is the exemption is not available if there's any expansion of an earlier project. And the NOE suggests that this project will expand, but it doesn't really provide any detail on that. So it's hard to know, how much, where is it going to be expanded? Why is it going to be expanded? The map on
Carolyn,
page
I'm sorry to
83.
interrupt, Carolyn, but we do need you, you're at your 3 minutes, so we do need you to wrap up. Thank
Okay,
you.
I would just go on to just finish by saying it's early days for your agency, and all of these projects are setting precedents that will be followed. And we urge you to get this CEQA compliance right, as I know you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Any other public comment, please?
I'm looking for any additional raised hands. And there is no further public comment.
Okay, this to the board then. Do any board members wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Gabe,
Yeah, not, well, I guess just clarifications, if that's okay, on 6C and 6F.
clarification on 6E is in Edward,
Charlie and Foxtrot.
Charlie, okay, and Foxtrot. Okay,
Yeah, so for 6F, the expansion of the hours, I was just curious, it sounds like we're buying 230 extra hours for Charlotte. My only question is, do we have a statement of work with her? I didn't see it in the consent calendar.
Yes, we do. It was part of the original contract addendum that we're modifying.
Okay, and the additional hours are in fulfillment of that original statement of work.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then for 6C, Charlie, on the West Marin evacuation route, my understanding is, we go from 15 to 55,372. Just the question on money and timing and maybe priority. So it looks like Stinson and Bolinas and Marin Fire County are transferring some of their funds. Does that have any impact on the completion or the funding of the evacuation route project?
It'll potentially decrease the amount of work that can be done during this fiscal year, but due to the length of time the environmental compliance is going to take, it won't likely have an overall impact because we'll be able to refund that bucket or that program next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Appreciate it.
and just a point of order, we should hold discussion on these items later, but thanks for, I let that slip. My apologies. Let's see, I said, Julie McMillan, you had your hand up, and then Dennis, please.
Yeah, I had just given Mark a really minor typo correction to the minutes on page 6. That's item A.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Dennis, please.
Thanks, Bruce. I was wondering if you could request our environmental staff respond to that memo from firm or some of the questions they raised, if you would, please.
Okay. Let's see. Julie. Rachel, excuse me, Rachel Kurtz.
Thank you. Are we at a point we should request to pull item B to get response on that and move the rest of the agenda, the consent calendar?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion then, excluding item B.
So what I understand is there's a request to further discuss item B, and all other items are clear. So let's start here. Let's entertain a motion to approve items A, C, D, E, F, and G.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And
Second.
motion and second. Rachel,
Allison.
Allison, excuse me. Rachel, I see your hand was up. I'm sorry.
Bolinas Fire District,
Aye.
City of Mill Valley,
Aye.
City of San Rafael,
Aye.
City of Larkspur,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Aye.
Inverness Fire District,
Aye.
Marinwood Community Services District,
Aye.
Muir Beach Community Services District,
Aye.
Novato Fire District,
Aye.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District,
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District,
Aye.
Stinson Beach Fire District,
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera,
Aye.
Town of Ross,
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo.
Aye.
The motion passes with 100%.
Thanks, board and team. And we have had item B, request for further discussion and request for our staff, environmental staff, to respond to the questions raised by the public. So great. Let's, Anne, I'm assuming you're going to take the lead on this, Anne Krelock, or?
Oh, excuse me, Bruce, can I add a question to be addressed in there?
I'm sorry, Sashi.
Could I, if she's going to address all the questions, could I add one to be addressed in with that before she starts, so that I don't have to ask another one and then she has to respond to it again?
Go ahead.
Okay. I believe that Barbara Kohler also kind of raised the question of doing work on state park lands. So just wanted to have that addressed in the public meeting. I know, Mark, you had addressed that separately, but it'd be good to have the public hear that. And then shoot, now I forgot my other question. I bet you'll cover it there. So I'll just leave that there. If you could address the jurisdictional point about state park, it being state park land, or maybe Mark addresses that and then Ann addresses the rest.
And I can handle the public space one first and then have you handle the compliance questions. And we have done an in-depth analysis about the capability of using MWPA funding on public lands, and it has come back in the affirmative that we can. And rather than spell out how we got there in this session, we intend to bring this to the exec committee, finance committee, and the full board in the month of December.
For a thorough explanation and vetting, I just may add.
Correct.
So this is planned for an agenda item for next month for the executive and finance committee for full public deliberation. Sashi. Thank you. Thumbs up from Sashi. Thank you. So let's, Anne, I think you are on.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I think along with the memo from Fern, you should have also received a response from staff going through each of the items that were raised in that comment memo and providing some additional information for you. So I'll maybe take a moment and go through that information to help the discussion today. One of the concerns raised was regarding Manzanita and any potential work having to do with Manzanita limbing up within the Novato Zone Bahia HOA Defensible Space Project. And to clarify, Novato Fire has stated that they don't actually have any plans to remove or limb up any Manzanita within the project area, but I would like to point out that the Manzanita that the comment letter is referring to is common Manzanita There are no special status manzanita within the project area, and common manzanita does not have any special status either through California Native Plant Society or state or federal regulatory agencies. And so there are no actual legal restrictions to limbing up or trimming or removing common manzanita for our purposes. And it would be pretty unusual to restrict projects to, prohibit removal of plant species that are not special status. And just to clarify, the project does not be including manzanita removal or trimming regardless. And then one of the concerns was work within wetted landscapes, concern about work within wetlands and riparian areas. And Nevada Fire has clarified that there are no wetlands or riparian, there's no riparian vegetation within the project area. Regardless, there are activities that are permitted within the upland areas, non-wetted areas associated with streams. And we do have project design and implementation features to ensure that any activities that we do avoid any impacts to riparian areas. And if we wanted to push our activities beyond that, we would seek a permit with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, sometimes referred to as a 1600 permit, or a lake and streambed alteration agreement. And then, before I go on to the concerns regarding the other project that's on state parks land, I thought I'd invite Tanya, Caitlin, or Sabrina, or anyone else to add anything that I've missed. Thumbs up if you think I've covered everything, or if there's anything you want to add. Sabrina?
Thanks, Anne. I just wanted to clarify, there was a comment by Ms. Longstreth regarding the scope of the Class 4 exemption and a suggestion that it is limited to the 100-foot from structures. And I just wanted to reiterate that the operative language, the important language of the Class 4 exemption under CEQA is that it consists of a minor public or private alteration in the condition of land, water, and/or vegetation, which do not involve the removal of healthy, mature scenic trees, except for forestry and agricultural purposes. And the 100-foot limitation is suggested as a non-exclusive example. The exemption goes on to say examples include, but are not limited to, and then they give several examples of types of work that could qualify for the exemption, but it's not an exclusive list. And so based on the characteristics of the proposed work and the specifics of this particular project, the environmental team determined that the Class 4 exemption is appropriate here, as well as the Class 1 exemption, because it is just maintenance of a previously modified area and not an expansion of that use, which is also addressed in the response memo by staff today.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. That is specifically in reference to the Ridgecrest project on state parks land, and that's exactly right. The footprint of the project as described in our notice of exemption is within the footprint of the project that was described in the previous notice of exemption filed by state parks. We're filing an exemption for our action of funding the project as a responsible agency under CEQA. So let's see. Regarding use of Class 1 categorical exemption, which is for existing facilities and is often used as maintenance of existing facilities. We feel that's appropriate, partly because as Sabrina mentioned, the footprint of this project is within the original footprint of the project proposed by state parks originally, and so does not include any expansion. And in addition, we feel that this approach is also consistent with the ecologically sound practices guidance that shaded fuel breaks should be considered permanent facilities that require long-term maintenance. And so the maintenance of these shaded fuel breaks will be considered in our environmental documents. In terms of project timing, that is, and I would probably bring in Bree with state parks to address how they manage vegetation management on state parks lands. But the vast majority of activities associated with this project would take place outside of the nesting bird season as defined by state parks, because it's on state parks land. And that includes avoiding any activities that could disturb nesting northern spotted owls. And so there are a number of project design and implementation features proposed by us, by the MWPA, in addition to measures that are called impact avoidance and minimization measures that are already incorporated by state parks. That include a number of best practices around nesting birds, northern spotted owl, in order to ensure that there's no impact to these resources. And that includes, if you're going to conduct activities that could potentially impact northern spotted owl during the nesting season, it includes protocol level surveys for northern spotted owl. And then we added some additional language regarding protection of native plants, sensitive native plants. So environmental surveys would be conducted for rare plants if work occurs during the blooming season for those plants that could damage them. And then there were other concerns about just generally the use of desktop review and database searches. So we rely on a number of different databases for kind of that initial look at project areas. And they're really key because they help us narrow down where we think we need on the ground field surveys. So for example, one of the concerns highlighted in this comment letter is that sometimes the databases, get something a little wrong, or it's categorized a little in kind of an odd way. So for example, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife database called the California Natural Diversity Database, or CNDDB, includes occurrences of some rare plants that overlap the project area, but that's because it comes from a 1978 occurrence where just Mount Tam in general was identified as the location. So although it occurs within dune habitat, the occurrence overlaps our project area, even though it doesn't include any dune habitat. But those types of database searches really help us figure out where to do native plant surveys and where they're needed, so that we are using our time and energy and funding appropriately. So I would open that up to Grace and Tanya and Caitlin and Sabrina for additional comments in case I missed anything or categorized anything incorrectly. And then if any questions arise regarding specifically what state parks will be doing, I'd invite Bree to answer some of those as well, as she works with state parks.
Hi, Anne. I'd just like to chime in and quickly add that regarding the CNDDB database, some of those occurrences are non-specific areas that are just big, huge circles that encompass huge areas. Those are really helpful, like Anne said, to decide where we should do surveys, and we still think we should include them in our assessment, even though the data is flawed sometimes. The CNDDB includes notes in the metadata of how accurate the data is, and we definitely take that into consideration when trying to determine whether the species is likely to occur. And also, those desktop reviews aren't a replacement for surveys. They're just kind of a first step to see what surveys are needed.
Thank you, Grace.
Thanks, Anne. So any further response from Anne from you, or there were a number of issues raised, concerns that we're using exemptions properly, get it right, general support, and I'm hearing response that appears as though it is the opinion of our staff that and support that we're on pretty firm ground in that regard, if I may summarize. Let's see, I see Catherine Hilliard and then Gabe, please.
I just want to compliment the staff on the response. I read the letter carefully and they bring up good points, but I think if you read our, what she calls desktop summaries, they are so thorough and they're really very complete. So I appreciate the input, but I also want to congratulate the staff for a very thoughtful response. Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. Gabe, please, and then David Kimball.
Thank you, Bruce. I just wanted to circle back to Supervisor Rodoni's request for further staff investigation. So, question to the staff, given that direction, is there anything further, beyond your very thorough research here that you could bring to the board? And I'm wondering if Supervisor Rodoni feels this is satisfactory, because it seems like a very complete report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Let's go to David, please.
Do you want to let Dennis respond first?
Yeah, Dennis, would you like to respond?
Bruce, thank you. Yeah, I'm satisfied with staff's report because everything came so late. I wasn't able to thoroughly read everything. So I appreciate the comments today. I do think that since we're new and this is all new to us, we just need to be extremely careful going forward to make sure that we don't depend on something. It does make me feel comfortable talking about flawed reports, quite honestly. I think that's troubling. And then, I have a lot of faith in the Novato Fire District, but I don't know if I would call on them to determine if something's a wetland or not. So I just think we need to be cautious and aware of those sorts of things, just so we're aware of them, because it really is this agency that's at risk going forward. And so we want to depend on reliable information as much as we can. So thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for your response.
And may I just clarify?
Yes, Ann, please.
Okay. We were relying on aerial imagery, a lot of different types of data to make those determinations, but I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thanks. Thank you, Ann. Let's see, David and then Julie, please. David.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I think mine, excuse me, is along procedural lines. I'm just wondering, Ann and team, did we receive Fern's letter today, and did you do all this analysis today?
Yes, we received Fern's letter this morning, and so worked today to make sure we could respond to all of the points.
So my question then, thank you for that. So my question then is, I think we're all aiming for the same positive outcome in terms of environmental compliance. But being put in a position to have to be reading your memo while I'm trying to listen to you talk it goes against the goal that Dennis described. And I'm wondering to the board, and I may be that this is inappropriate because I don't know this part of the world that well, but I'm wondering if it's possible that if the MWPA issues analysis by a certain number of days prior to our board meeting, and we ask groups to respond, to give us at least 2 days. Today, maybe we got lucky because all the stars were available to turn on a dime this morning and put this analysis together in terms of Ann, Sabrina, consultants, and so forth. And I think that if we're going to really, as a board, feel comfortable that we're yaying or naying something, it needs more than just this. And I think that if we can have more, we can indeed reach the goal that Fern and others want to reach, which is that I think we all want to be environmentally, compliant. And I've been personally very happy that MWPA has taken environmental compliance so seriously. And I think we could strengthen that if we could have some procedures that we agree help each other have a little more time and thoughtfulness. Otherwise, if we have to defer this a month, we're going to be in a place where time is of the essence, and we need to show the communities that we're doing something. So it's a long-winded set of comments, but I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Mark, do you want to address that we are in discussion here? Do you want to address David's comment in regards to the timeliness of the availability of the information, timeliness of receipt of questions, and in interfacing with the board? I think it is an important.
Absolutely. And First I'll start off with that Ann has a monthly meeting with each of our environmental stakeholders, not necessarily discussing the specifics of our projects as far as the compliance pieces, but describing the projects as a whole. Then we typically announce what projects will be on the docket during our executive committee. So 2 weeks before the board of directors meeting, we usually have a list of the projects that are being proposed. And then our draft environmental documents waiting for your approval, we exceed the 72-hour notice that the Brown Act requires, and we historically post it 144 hours or 6 days in advance. So I feel that we are doing our part to make sure that the information is well shared, and we really can't share the documents any sooner than that because it's not appropriate for us to share draft documents outside of the, for one, without the board, they're documents for the board to review. And for two, they're usually getting finalized just before we get it posted. And believe me, I put the pressure on our entire team to be able to get those documents done in time that we have them done so that we can have that 6 days notice rather than 3 days notice.
And I'd love to ask Sabrina to add some thoughts about CEQA in general and public comment and what's permissible and legal under that structure.
Thank you, Anne. So, as most of you I think are aware, there is no required public comment and review period for projects that are determined to be exempt. It is just that there is an exhaustion requirement triggered when there is a public hearing like this afforded on a project before you approve it. And so where there is an opportunity to comment, members of the public who may have concerns or in fact oppose a project are obligated to raise those concerns to you at some point before you make a decision. And so it would be great to get, the written comments sooner than 6 hours before the hearing on it. But, as Anne noted, and as Mark alluded to, we strived to prepare a complete response in the time that we were afforded based on the time that the letter was submitted. So, I could recommend perhaps that the board request or encourage commenters to provide any written comments, maybe 24 hours at least before the hearing. And that way that would give your staff and consultants more time to digest the information and to provide you with a response that you have more than 30 minutes or so to read. But I expect that might be kind of a procedural requirement that you might need to adopt and that you couldn't just unilaterally adopt right now. So I would defer to Megan on the procedural questions, but under CEQA, at least, the process that you're following is legally adequate.
And I can speak briefly to the Brown Act component, which basically does allow anyone to make comments even during a meeting. So we can look at putting some policy boundaries around when we'll accept written comments, but I think per the Brown Act that we have a difficult time limiting that in any way. But again, we can look at policy options that will at least put some emphasis on the amount of time we need to give staff more of what they need.
Thanks, Sabrina. Thank you.
I would just add that it's not only to give staff more time, but it's also to enable us to have an informed board of decision makers.
Thank you, David. Julie, your hand's up.
Yeah, my comments were along the lines of David's. I don't like the material coming in at the last minute. I don't like the staff running around doing a fire drill to address the concerns. And I don't want us to be in a position where if someone's going to comment at the last minute, we automatically continue the item until the next month so that we can have a thorough review. But on the other hand, I don't think we and staff should be standing by the morning of a meeting expecting, something to be dumped on us and provide a 6-page analysis that's very thorough and compelling. And, the board has had 45 minutes to read it. It's not a good procedure. So I think in the future, we need to look carefully to determine if there is merit to continuing an item like this, then we should continue it to a subsequent meeting. If there's urgency to deciding something like this right now, then we make an exception.
Thank you, Julie. Rachel, please.
I'd like to continue with Julie's comments a bit, and specifically, we need to be able, these projects are just starting and we're starting to deliver, we need to track what will hold us to deliver and implement. And this type of delay in conversation, maybe it's critical or maybe it's not in terms of delivery to you move it a month or move it to another time. But in some cases, we may be in a position that we're missing a window to get work done. And at some point, the community is going to come back and say, why did you not get work done? And we need to be able to say, these items were intentionally pulled or intentionally delayed for right or wrong additional research. I imagine the team that worked on today's report in question were not just waiting for work. Something else has now not been done. So we need to be really careful when we're looking at these types of things and when they come in and what's the right timing.
Thank you, Rachel. Steve Burdo and Catherine Hilliard, please.
Yeah, I'll just be very quick because I think Julie and Rachel just basically summed up all of my comments. So I second what Julie and Rachel said.
Thank you, Steve. Catherine, please.
I'll also be really quick. I think that this has been approved already. And it's amazing to me that we had this letter from Fern so quick, so close before. So anyway, what I think is I look at these in terms of what is it that they're seeking and will they attempt to stop a project? And I did not see that in this letter, but the need to be responsible and legal in the response is critical. But I agree with everyone who said, sometimes the last minute stuff, we need to keep the projects moving. We have to make sure that they stay moving. So that's why my original comment was I was really pleased to receive the letter and thankful that the staff at this time had an opportunity to do it. But I agree with all of you. This shouldn't be a fire drill and it also shouldn't delay. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And Sashi, please.
I just want to ask either Megan or Sabrina. Sabrina, you did talk about that there isn't a requirement per se for public comment on a notice of exemption, but just maybe kind of about our approach to CEQA kind of overall. So I think there's been an attempt to have a partnership with interest groups like Fern and with ESPP, so that as we do this, kind of new that we're, kind of going on with a common understanding, but maybe just sort of more broadly kind of talk about, what we're trying to accomplish, with this type of review. Like I know that we're prioritizing projects that are in the exempt category right now. So we're going to be moving into more complicated projects that maybe aren't completely exempt or, so if we could maybe kind of talk about more of what our approach to the CEQA is, and also just that there is no right way to do CEQA. It's a procedure, and it's not like you can say we have done the right thing. So if you could just talk more about the approach. I think probably Sabrina.
Sure. So, you're correct that there's often a variety of options available to an agency about how to conduct CEQA review, but the primary consideration always in approaching the environmental review decisions and the process is, what does the evidence say? Where does the substantial evidence take you? So for each one of these exemption determinations, there's quite a lot of consultant research and technical expertise that's brought to bear to decide whether a project fits the criteria of any of the exemptions available under CEQA. And there are many cases that kind of lay out the explanation of the process. First you decide, do you have a project? Is it a discretionary decision that could impact the environment? If so, then you consider, is it exempt? And so that's the process we're in right now, is considering which and whether any exemptions are applicable to the proposed actions in the work plan. If and when we find a project that doesn't fit one of the exemptions, then you're correct. Then we would move on to the next level of environmental review, which is either a negative declaration, a mitigated negative declaration or an EIR. And so far, my understanding is that, in the work plan and the prioritization of the projects, most of them have been determined to be fairly environmentally benign or have minimal impacts. And those are the low-hanging fruit that the agency is trying to go after right now. And you're correct that, eventually you're going to get to the hard stuff that's going to take a little bit more analysis. But for each one of these projects, the reason we're bringing a few to you every month is that there is quite a lot of analysis and work that goes into even just documenting that they meet the criteria for the exemption. Fundamentally underlying all of these is that the agency must have substantial evidence to support its determination that the project meets all of the criteria of the claimed exemption, as well as documenting the thought process and the conclusions for why none of the potential exceptions are met, which is why you get a thicker and thicker stack of paper each time we meet. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thanks, Sabrina, and thanks, board. David, do you have another?
I do. I just wanted to make a closing comment, and that is, I want to end on a positive note. And I think if all parties, MWPA and any external groups that want to weigh in, use best efforts to practice surprise prevention, I think we'll build much stronger relationships and trust. And I don't want the environmental groups to go away. We need them. And we need to be on the same team. So I would just like to make sure that we try to close this conversation on a positive note that, we're all in this together and we're headed for the same place. Let's, to the degree it's possible, to the degree it's realistic and feasible, let's use surprise prevention with each other. And I think we'll be a lot happier in the long run. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the comment. So yeah, we are in the situation of last minute written input and pulling together a team that examined the questions that were presented by the public. We have our legal counsel here, in essence, standing up and responding to those questions and feeling that my take is that we're in good standing. The decisions that were made were thoroughly analyzed, substantial record. So it's really the point now for the board to decide further action. And at this point in time, we can look for a motion to approve or some other motion or condition. So board, I put this before you to let's move this forward with your consent.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
David, Kimball, and Rachel, thank you. And thanks so much for all the discussion. Allison, please.
Salinas Fire District,
Aye.
City of Mill Valley,
Aye.
City of San Rafael,
Aye.
City of Larkspur,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Aye.
Inverness Fire District,
Aye.
Marinwood Community Services District,
Aye.
Muir Beach Community Services District,
Aye.
Novato Fire District,
Aye.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District,
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District,
Aye.
Stinson Beach Fire District,
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera,
Aye.
Town of Ross,
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo.
Aye.
Motion passes with 100%.
Thank you. Thank you, public. Thank you, board. Thank you, staff, for being present and supporting this discussion. And I do think we need to look forward to the comments from David and others in regards to working together in a timely manner, getting a record in place. Mark Brown, that all can consider thoroughly before, and not making this the last minute, quick analysis and decision. So Mark, will ask you to consider how you can get that, move that forward, either through the executive committee or however you want to proceed. We'll just leave that in your lap, please.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to item number 7, staff reports. Lisa Schissman, please provide the board with the staff report on finance.
Yes, good afternoon. Let me share my screen here just to help you guys get familiar with these reports. And we have no revenues in yet. We're expecting those the second week in December. And expenses, as you can see at the very bottom here, total expenses are at 9%. And we are about 37% through the year. So expenditures are still kind of low. Mark and Ann could probably comment on the progress of the core programs, but I know that when the property tax revenues come in, we will be paying out the D-space and local mitigation payments to the agencies. So that'll be a nice chunk of change. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out is that some of these reds here, environmental compliance and the evacuation study in particular, we are going to propose that we amend those budgeted amounts. And it will be by taking some of the unused funds from last year and or moving another line over. So they will be like net zero adjustments, but we will bring those to the board next month. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you.
And Bruce, if I may add before we get to questions.
Yeah,
and
thank
that
you.
is, that transfer that Lisa was talking about for environmental compliance and evacuation study, we had anticipated that that would be the case for the rollover from last fiscal to this fiscal. We were just waiting for the total closeout of last fiscal so that we could make the proper and accurate recommendation to the board. And then also, while I'm talking, I just thought I would let you all know that we do have a finance committee meeting now scheduled for December 13th at 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Mark. So board, any questions? And let's see, Mark, you're gonna have to, Alyssa, your screen is, I can't see folks with your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me stop sharing.
But that's okay. Mark or team, if you can help me, if anyone has questions, please. And I am seeing no questions. Okay, thanks so much. To the board for discussion. Any discussion? And I'm seeing none. So Alyssa, thanks so much. We'll see you again next month.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item 7B, the work plan progress update. MWPA Planning and Program Manager Ann Krelock, please. You're going to provide a board with a report on the work plan.
I am going to share my screen, and I'm wondering if you can see a PowerPoint slide with a goat.
Yes, let's see. There.
Goat back?
Which one are we seeing? That it?
Hopefully you're seeing.
Yes, oh, there we go. Oh, how can I? Yes.
With the happy goat. So in response to a request to have a PowerPoint presentation and focus on a few items among the many that we're working on, I thought I'd prepare a very short PowerPoint presentation. It's 2 slides, so it should go quickly, and provide you guys with a bit of an update. So in terms of coordination with member agencies, partners, and stakeholders, as you know, I and the consultants are continuing to work with our member agencies to move our core projects from the work plan forward. And we're also meeting regularly with partners such as Marin County Parks and Open Space, state parks, national parks, Marin Water, to coordinate wherever our projects overlap those lands and make sure we're working very closely on how to, not only where and what is going to take place, but how it's going to be implemented later on. We also met with several other stakeholders, including the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, just to introduce our program and share our approach to environmental compliance. We also continue to meet with the Ecologically Sound Practices Group to collaborate on that guidance document that they prepared, and we're hoping to meet again in the near future to discuss potential edits there. And then we'll be taking that to the Advisory Technical Committee, hopefully in December. We're going to be looking for a date that works for folks, hopefully mid-December. In terms of objectives and metrics, we have a working group, and Charlotte Jourdain has been helping and taking the lead on that. Really, the Objectives and Metrics Working Group recently held its 4th meeting to finalize objectives under each of the 6 board-approved goals. and map out how our projects from the work plan fit under each of those objectives, and then discuss how to measure success for each of those objectives. The product for this work will be presented to both the Advisory Technical Committee and the Operations Committee. Community grants. We are neck deep in working on the community grants program. Charlotte Jourdain, again, has been playing a huge role, working so hard on this. We have developed a really highly integrated grant application process that begins with a defensible space and home hardening evaluation using the Fireside DSI evaluation tool. And this is going to allow MWPA to track the use of grant funds for mitigation and develop targeted grant programs that are really tailored to the needs of those communities. We're working with member agencies that are not currently using the DSI app to establish a process that's accessible to everyone. We're about to start beta testing that process, and we hope to launch the resident grant program in December. And we're pretty excited about that. In terms of the coastal zone, you saw a memo to the board or a staff report to the board discussing a bit in terms of the cost implications of working in the coastal zone. We're working really closely with county planning staff to pursue permits that are needed to do our projects in the coastal zone, specifically the evacuation route vegetation management in West Marin. And we already saw the CEQA for that project previously. However, we're working with county planning staff to ensure that we comply with the Coastal Act. So that includes additional biological resources surveys throughout the project area and additional cost, of course. In the long term, we're looking at a lot of different strategies to streamline this work in the coastal zone. And one of the potential avenues open to us is a public works plan, which is a way of streamlining kind of a programmatic permit approach to streamline this kind of work in the coastal zone. And a couple of different resource conservation districts have taken this approach previously, and we're hoping to learn from their successes and failures and see if that approach might work for us. And we've been communicating with those resource conservation districts and county staff on that. And then the last item on this slide is our web portal. We are developing a new process to create our next work plan. We kicked off the process with our consultants to think through how to make our work plan development process more efficient and more collaborative and more transparent to our member agencies and our partners as well. And we're very excited about this. We think it has great potential to make that process a lot more efficient and really build better projects in the process. We're gonna, there will be an online web portal where member agencies can log in and upload project descriptions, GIS data, or even draw a polygon on a map within the web portal if they don't have access to GIS, and link those projects to the board adopted goals and then the objectives and metrics. So it's more of a seamless process. And we're really excited about that. We're hoping to get that launched in the next couple of months. And I will take you to my next slide, which is just a reminder that, you know, even though we're working really hard on the environmental compliance and it takes a lot of time and energy for those vegetation management projects, we're also getting a lot done. And so I totaled up the miles associated with the projects that were approved through October. And that includes 260 miles of roadside evacuation routes, not counting the work in the coastal zone currently, and 327 acres of shaded fuel breaks and prescribed herbivory, and 12 miles of fire road enhancement. And so we feel like we're making really good progress, and we're really appreciative of the board's leadership on this.
Thank you, Ann. So much in motion here. Really excellent. Commending you and Mark and all the work that you're doing. This is just astounding. So, the board, any questions on about this item from the board? Gabe, please, and Sashi.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Anne for, something succinct, 2 slides, and especially the metrics. That really helps and gives us some focus. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Sashi, please.
Yeah, I'm going to say about the same thing, and I just wanted to, I think the metrics are super helpful to be able to transmit back to our member, agencies. So it'd be great when you do these reports, if you could, capture that slide, or so that we can, in a format that we can send back out to our boards. But thank you. I think that's really, the metrics are very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Sashi. Other questions from other board members? I have a quick question, Anne, and it is about work in the coastal zone. I think we've been surprised a little bit by what, actually, I think you anticipated that we might have some question that we'd have to address beyond outside of the coastal zone. And you're looking at options. So it appears the coastal zone work is going to be more expensive than an equivalent project outside the coastal zone. Would you agree to that? Yes?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. We're
Okay.
definitely finding that.
And then as far as the path forward, you mentioned this public works plan. I know nothing about these things. I understand programmatic EIRs and those kinds of things, but perhaps can you just provide a little bit more description of what a public works plan is, what the extent, the duration, the timing, and then the applicability of that to the work, the scope of work that you have, please? Just a little quick summary, please.
Sure. The short version is it's odd terminology. Basically, it means write up all of the work, the type of work that you want to do in the coastal zone, work with county planning staff and potentially coastal commission staff to come up with kind of your best management practices for that kind of work, and make sure that county planning staff and coastal commission staff agree that with those practices incorporated, your work will not result in impacts to coastal resources. And it ends up being a bit of a long process, but it could be that in the long run, it saves us time and energy. One of the challenges is that those public works plans, those PWPs that have been moved forward currently assume that each of those projects are going through the CalVTP tiering process. So it's a different level of CEQA analysis than what we've been doing. And so it may end up being additional resources and time and all of that associated with getting those projects done. But we're looking for ways to find common ground with the folks who are tasked with implementing the Coastal Act at the state level, and working with county staff to find solutions to move forward. But ultimately it's state law, and so county staff doesn't have the ability to dismiss state law. So we're all just working together for solutions, and that solution is one potential one. It's brand new. A couple of resource conservation districts have pursued it so far. It took them about a little under a year, but full-time staff working on it. And it could be that we can take their templates and pursue a more streamlined version of that process for ourselves. And we've been talking with Marin, our CD, and others about it as well.
Okay, thanks. And then I have to ask this question. In the meantime, let's say I have a home in the coastal zone. I had a wildfire mitigation specialist knock on my door and visit my home, walk around, give me a prescription, send pictures and arrows and reds and this and that, and say, do the following. Is it okay for me to go do that right now if I'm in the coastal zone?
Well, right now,
D-space work is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right now I am working with county planning staff to figure out what our common messaging is on that. As you know, the County Community Development Agency created a new local coastal program, new LCP, and that addresses compliance with the Coastal Act and the coastal zone. And they haven't finished the hazards piece of that yet. And so we're providing input on that document in that process to help address these kinds of questions. So I don't have good, clear answers yet, and that's because the conversations are still going.
Thank you, Anna. We'll look forward to getting clarity on that here eventually. Board members, any other questions? let's go. to
And
public.
Bruce, if I may, we
Yeah, Mark.
skipped over public comment for agenda item 7A. So when you go to public comment for this item, I suggest we have public comment for 7A and 7B.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Thank you. Public comments on 7A and 7B, please.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Fantastic report. Mark and Ann, you're both to be commended for all this ongoing work. Thank you so much. Let's move on to item 8, action items, MWPA governance processes and procedures and code of conduct. Mark, will you please give us a staff report on this item?
Thank you. And as a reminder to the board, the formation of the governance ad hoc subcommittee was through Bruce's suggestion and board support that we create the governance ad hoc to look at and explore the way we elect president, vice president, and any type of succession planning we may have, since the JPA language and the bylaws are very silent to how that process goes. When we looked at the how we wanted to form that governance ad hoc subcommittee and go to have different size agencies and then have all those zones represented, it ended up that the executive committee was actually the people that we were looking for that. And there was no reason really to have an ad hoc subcommittee because this is the type of topic that we can easily have in a public forum. Staff did quite a bit of research and made a proposal on how we can do the elections for president and vice president and have a succession from president or from vice president to president with an affirmation vote, and then a process for nominating and electing the president, or excuse me, the vice president. We also recommend that we find a way that we make sure that we diversify the types of agencies that are represented by the president and vice president, whether it's a large agency or a small agency, or if it's a fire district or it's a town. So as we look for that, staff recommends that we seek that type of diversification. We also wanted to make sure that if for some reason the president or vice president were not available for a meeting, that we had a process to have someone facilitate the meeting. So the recommendation is that we used members from the executive committee to be backups to the president and vice president. In absence of any of those 5 being available, which is probably going to be pretty rare, then we suggested the executive officer facilitate the meeting. And then finally, when it comes to voting for the president and vice president, if for some reason one of our board officers has to step down off the MWPA board, then we have a provision so that we can have a midterm election. And then the code of conduct, as we were discussing this at the executive committee the first time, there was a recommendation that staff look into different codes of conduct. We reached out, and some of you may look at the recommended code of conduct to see some elements from your town or city's code of conduct put into that. And then we had a really good discussion at our last executive committee meeting about the code of conduct. And so we made the recommendations from the executive committee, put them in this current version of the code of conduct for your consideration today. And our recommendation is that you as the board give us as staff the approval to move forward in making these board policies to be included into next month's consent calendar. And then that also allows us the opportunity to receive any input today, put that into the proposed board policy, and then we bring it to consent.
Thank you, Mark. Let's hear questions from the board, please. Board members. Steve Burdo, please.
Yeah, real quick, and great job on the staff report and the presentation here, Mark. I think it's very well reasoned and very well put together. My question is, we mentioned the executive committee in this document, but should we be articulating the process for electing the executive committee as well in this document, or should we keep that as something separate, just putting it out there for consideration? It makes sense to me that we would include that as well in here, because I certainly agree with everything else as it applies to the officers, the president and the vice president here. But just wondering if we should also have this policy include the process for the executive committee as well.
Thanks, Steve.
That is actually as in the process of selection of the executive committee and the finance committee are spelled out in the MWPA bylaws.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Catherine Hilliard, please.
So short form of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that president and vice president will be elected for 2-year terms and then rotating, however they get nominated, I'm not quite sure, but between large and small agencies alternately. And then I'm assuming that the president and vice president are also the president and vice president of the executive committee. Is that correct?
The bylaws stipulate that the president needs to be in the executive committee. I will need to confirm if the bylaws stipulate that the vice president needs to be part of the executive committee.
Okay. So then the question is, what if someone would, I know it looks like we're going up through the chairs, which is, it makes sense. I mean, you want 2-year terms so that the president has a chance to get familiar and also then to conduct things. And then that's a sort of a internship for the vice president. We're going up through the chairs. What if we have an interruption or someone else comes to the fore who would like to be considered? How do we handle that?
That option is in there. And so for that month leading before that we would do the election, that is when board members could express their desire to move into that role. And then it would be, we have that process built into how we would vote.
Okay. And then is it the president's prerogative to appoint to the executive committee?
With it is, but with the acknowledgement of the majority of the board.
Okay, thank you. That was the clarification. I was just asking for clarification here. Thank you.
And I just confirmed, looking at the JPA or bylaws, that it is the president and the vice president shall be members of the executive committee. And the other stipulation is that we do have representation from each of the 5 geographical areas of the MWPA.
And that there's a rotation between when, 1 year the president comes from a large agency, or 2 years, the next one behind comes from a smaller agency. Is that still also part of it?
Yeah, but they are 1-year terms. So
1 year?
in essence, a board officer would be by design a board officer for 2 years, 1 year as the vice president, 1
I
year
see.
as the president.
Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarifying questions, Catherine. Let's see, Sashi, Steve, you still have your hand up. Let's have Sashi first.
Catherine just, I think, clarified what I was, one of the things I was going to say, which is that that it's still 1 year at a time, but the idea was to let people know that they would be expected to do the second year in that other role. So maybe when I think we're going to be giving staff direction to put this in a policy, and maybe that could be that language could be clarified. And then the other question I had is the language about only if the current vice president notifies the executive officer of their intention not to seek office would the president call for candidates for president. And that was I think a change from what we'd kind of seen. Maybe I just didn't read it properly in the executive committee. My apologies. You just clarifying that there's still the ability to have nominations from the floor, because I think that's people can send letters of intent, but there should always be an opportunity for nominations from the floor at elections. So just wanted to clarify that that is what we're going to be doing here.
That was the intent, and if the language isn't clear to that, I'll rewrite. I'll fix that part to make the provide that clarity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sashi. Steve Berto, you still have your hand up.
Yeah, it just a clarification question based on Mark's response, because I thought that the bylaws also deal with the president and vice president. Is that true? And then my question, my further question, if that is the case, is why would we do this policy as opposed to doing them for the finance committee and the executive committee?
The bylaws simply state that there will be a president and vice president, but there is no process of how they are appointed stipulated in the bylaws.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's see, let's move on then. Let's move on to public comment, please.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, back to the board now for any further discussion input before entertaining a motion. Sasha, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just want to make a more deliberative comment than before. I think that the executive committee discussion was, we had some discussion around how prescriptive we wanted to be in this process. And there was some desire for, because we're a new agency and we're still kind of figuring it out, to be a little bit more prescriptive, but definitely to leave some room for, things like allowing nominations from the floor, which is, allows for a more open and, kind of transparent process. And staying within the bylaws. So the idea was that this would be written up as one of the board's policies versus the bylaws, and that there probably are other policies that we can write going forward, that the board could address at a later time. But I just wanted to kind of clarify that that's going to be, so there are the bylaws, and then there'll be some board policies. Like, for example, there could be a reserves policy, or there could be, any number of things that we want to set as a, as a signal to the public, but that this would be in there. My suggestion as staff writes this up is that we try to be a little leaner in how we present it, so that we just preserve those, those kind of high level things that we want to get to without, getting too much into details that inadvertently create some strictures that we didn't want to create. So I know that may seem a little bit vague, but I think Mark probably understands kind of what I'm getting at here. And if others want to jump in, I just wanted to frame it that way.
Thank you, Sashi. Let's see. Catherine Donnie, please.
Yes, from Inverness. Sachi, I just didn't understand what you said. Can you put that in just a 2-minute elevator speech?
Sorry.
No, not 2 minutes. No, not 2 minutes, Sashi. Let's put this into a very clear statement.
Okay.
Because I had no idea what you're talking about.
So two things. One is, so we just had outlined kind of a process of how this is going to go. Where does that live? Does it live in the bylaws? No, it's going to live in a policy document. And there will be other policy documents that will follow for other things, a universe of things. And then I said that as we write up policies, this is going to be the first one that we're writing. We should try to be, kind of get the important points down, but not put ourselves into a box on, procedurally that doesn't allow for the discretion of the board where it's appropriate. We're trying to make things, since we're new at this, we're trying to make things, clearer, but we don't want to put ourselves unnecessarily into a box. Is that better?
Don't paint ourselves into a corner.
Yeah.
That's better. Thank you.
Julie, please.
Mark, are you contemplating that the draft policy will come to the executive committee before it goes on consent for the next board meeting?
I can.
I think that might help streamline stuff. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Julie. And I agree. I concur. So let's see. I think we're moving towards a motion. I believe, Mark, you were going to clarify a couple of items that you committed to on record here.
Clarify the 1-year piece, that is 1 year as vice president and 1 year as president, and then clarify the opportunity to be nominated from the floor.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. I'm looking for a motion here, please.
I so move.
Catherine,
Second.
motion. Steve Berto, second, I think.
I thought we were just giving guidance and this was going to come back on consent later. So maybe we don't need a motion.
We were hoping to get.
The motion was to allow staff to draft the board policies to bring forward for consent item.
Okay. Meaning, so the staff will draft this for, and we will consider it. It'll go to the executive committee next month and finally to the board as a consent item. Okay,
It's one extra step. Yes, I'm sorry.
okay, thanks for clarification. I feel like I'm on a roller coaster here. So, did we have a motion?
Catherine moved.
Catherine, and, okay,
Salinas Fire District,
Aye.
City of Mill Valley,
Aye.
City of San Rafael,
Aye.
City of Larkspur,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Aye.
Inverness Fire District,
Aye.
Marin Wood Community Services District,
Aye.
Muir Beach Community Services District,
Sorry, that was Muir Beach.
Novato Fire District,
aye,
Sleepy Hollow Fire District, Sleepy Hollow Fire District,
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District,
Aye.
Stinson Beach Fire District,
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera,
Aye.
Town of Ross,
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo.
Aye.
The motion passes with 100%.
thanks, everyone. Thanks, board and staff. Let's move on to item B, the process for executive officer annual performance review and pay review. Mark and Megan, please.
I'll start off and then I'll hand off to Megan. And I will say it's hard to believe I've been here now a year and a month. So time has flown by, and that means it is time for an evaluation. And so staff did quite a bit of background and research, and I leaned on a lot of my own personal experience of 30 years of public service, writing evaluations, receiving evaluations and reviewing evaluations. And with the ultimate goal of an evaluation is to help an employee improve their performance for the organization. And I also would like to create a model that is not just for the executive officer, but the same type of standards for all of our employees, because I think all employees should be evaluated to the same standards rather than having different standards for different levels of the organization. One of the asks for today is the executive committee is recommending to the full board that the closed session evaluation for the executive officer be handled by the executive committee rather than the full board. And also for your consideration is the categories or the criteria of the evaluation. And we did lean on several of our member agencies to pull that language from. You will notice that no ratings were included in those criteria, whether it's 0 to 5, or if it's meet standards, exceed standards, below standards. And I'm going to give you pros and cons to both. I received some great comments from Barbara Kohler in favor of ratings. I personally am opposed to ratings. And the reason why I am is that it tends to be the easy button for the person providing the evaluation. And to me, the most important part of the evaluation is the comments. And if you give the evaluator the opportunity simply to hit a rating, then sometimes the comments don't actually have the value that they deserve. Plus, I'll be honest, a 5 from me is different than a 5 from another person. So what does a 5 really mean? Or if it exceeds standards or exceeds expectations, well, maybe my expectations of an employee are much different than someone else's expectations of an employee. So I find ratings to be very subjective. I also find that employees tend to look too hard at the ratings rather than actually looking at the comments that have been delivered to them. Those are my views, but the positives of the ratings is that, especially for board members and especially for people who are providing a 360 review, and thank you to Director Kurtz for recommending the 360 review, because I very much support that aspect of it. We're all busy, and it could not having the ability to provide ratings may actually cause people not to provide an evaluation at all. So perhaps ratings with, or evaluations with the ratings, but with maybe not as thoughtful of comments as we would like, are better than no review at all. And by the time we have a 360 review and we do receive input from all of the board members, and Megan's going to discuss how we can accomplish that, then perhaps that's where the subjectivity of what the ratings mean gets smoothed out and they actually start meaning something. So that is a recommendation we would like to receive in the motion for today is with ratings or without ratings, and then we can move forward on that. And with that, I'll pass it off to Megan for closing out the discussion or the presentation.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks. Megan, please.
Yes, and actually I have to credit Barbara Kohler with giving us another idea yesterday that we would like to sort of add into the report, which is that we've sort of started with the assumption that Sam would be the negotiator and sort of the person taking in information about the evaluations that have been done. And it was actually Jean's suggestion that we get a third-party evaluator rather than have our attorney doing it, our labor attorney, in part because it's probably going to be more economical, but also because there are people who sort of specialize in this. And one of those people is actually Jean Bonander, who I don't know whether she would ultimately be the person that the board would choose, but she had some great thoughts on this. And it was Barbara who told us that she actually has, Jean has done the MCE executive officer evaluations for a couple of years, and she's worked with various JPAs to do this work. So we reached out to Jean yesterday and got some input on sort of her approach, which lines up, I think, really nicely with this one. And I think this would be typical of many third-party evaluators. So she suggested she had other names as well. So the board doesn't need to commit at this moment to using Jean necessarily, but the idea being that this is an area that they work in and are familiar with, and they have sort of a template that they can use to get information, but most importantly, they'll do a lot of outreach to board members who have either not filled out an evaluation or don't have time to, or would prefer to do it as a dialogue. So that is sort of to facilitate getting more information up front, so that when we go to the closed session, assuming it's with the executive committee, then there would just be more information there. It would be a richer sort of discussion because that person would have already taken all the information in and evaluated it and sort of put together a synthesis of that. So that would be in addition to our process that's proposed here. And again, it potentially could be something that we could bring to the executive committee at the next meeting, suggestions for who those consultants might be, and have the executive committee choose who that person, that third-party evaluator would be, so that we can get that ball rolling and those evaluations can sort of come from that person and roll out if that's something that the board feels comfortable doing.
Okay.
That was my only portion for now, but I can answer questions if the board has them.
Oh, Catherine, please.
Yes, as a senior leader, Kaiser Permanente for 30 years, I am much a proponent of 360 evaluation, goal-based. It is so important to get all of the information from your board, from your constituents, from your employees, etc., and from yourself, and to put the goals out there and put there in a short-term, medium-term, long-term goal is so important. So I am so supportive of this.
Thanks, Catherine. Gabe, let's see. Let's go Catherine Hilliard and Gabe Paulson, please.
Hi, so I'm looking at this as, first of all, I would say that the executive committee is the appropriate one to give input to whoever is leading the negotiations with Mark, or whoever is the incumbent. I'm not seeing that it's tied to the possibilities for increases or what we're talking about here. A percentage of increase above the current pay. Are we talking about bonus or any of that stuff? It's not. So you don't know what you're just evaluating the work. So what I would think is what we need is, based on our priorities that the executive committee recommends to the board and the board approves, in fairness to the executive officer, that he then or she establishes what he or she will do in the coming year. And so then he and the board agree, and then that is the criteria that he will be reviewed upon. Did you meet the goals that we agreed to for you? So that's my input.
Thanks, Catherine. Gabe, please.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm definitely, supportive of the review, the 360 review. Two minor things I really hope we consider. Mark, I'm not quite in agreement with, only notes and not numbers. I think we saw earlier in the meeting when, Anne presented the metrics, it was so crisp. And the numbers, of course, are not absolute, they're relative. But the ones, if they're low, tell us there's a red flag. The fives, if they're high, tell us that, kudos, and it doesn't take away from the notes. So I would urge that we do use numerics because it invites a different type of thinking. I think you need both the quantitative and the more descriptive textual. My second point is I wonder if it would be possible for all of the board members in this meeting to fill out this form, but it would be submitted to the executive committee and they could handle it. I really think everyone's voice here is important. And I don't think we should feel, let's just trust that we've all worked together. We've all worked with Mark. And I really think we all think you're doing a great job. And if any of us see a way to improve or want to give you kudos, that should all be sent to the executive committee. So I don't want this to be something that's seen as a efficiency or a delegation. It's part of our morale and our group effort here. So thank you.
Thanks.
Megan, can you cover that aspect of how we're targeting how we can target the full board?
Yeah, that was actually our hope would be to seek input through an online evaluation and then through the discussions between the facilitator of the evaluation and the board members. So it would get the full board. And I think there would be outreach beyond that as is laid out in the criteria, I believe, to reach out to the Citizens Oversight Committee, get some input from different parties as part of that 360 evaluation, but that also the board specific input would be channeled to that the person who would be doing the evaluation, and then that would be brought to the executive committee, sort of a summary of quantitative and qualitative, I think, about how those discussions had all gone and what sort of ratings and that type of thing, if that is that part of the report.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan. Sashi, please.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One, thank you for clarifying that. I do think it's important for the whole board to be involved in this because Mark is the whole board's employee. So the intention of having an evaluator is just to kind of facilitate the whole process on boards that I've chaired or when I've been mayor. Usually it's been the chair or the mayor who kind of puts the process together of receiving input from the other members of the board. But since we do have such a large board, is that what we're proposing that Jean would do?
Yes, exactly. And I think it would be facilitated by there's so many of us, and I think that she's done the MCE size board, which I think is double our size.
Right.
And it also removes any issues associated with outside of public meeting discussions that might come up as an issue. So I feel like it can sort of simplify the process for us to have someone as sort of the representative who synthesizes that information rather than put all of that on one member of the board or of the executive committee.
Okay, and then the 360 review, are we saying that is something we would do every single year? Because I'm not sure that I think that is something we need to do every year, maybe at intervals, because typically a 360 review comes with a fairly significant amount of costs, particularly if the 360 review involves members of the public, for example. So just curious what the intention was, whether that was intended to be every year or just this go round.
My intent would be for every year, but also it's rather than going through some of the 360 reviews where you go through a very formal and you hire a contractor to do that 360 review. I'm proposing that we create a Google questionnaire that populates a spreadsheet that the third-party evaluator would be able to use. That way we can get that 360 review inexpensively and annually.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sashi. Thank you, Mark, for your answer. Julie, please, and then Catherine Hilliard.
I was just going to say that I think the board president has enough on his plate. And I like the idea of a third-party person. Also, when I've been mayor and compiled comments, if there are awkward comments, it can jeopardize the relationship between the mayor and the town manager. So I think it's better to have a third party kind of assembling all that and being a little more objective.
I agree.
Thank you, Julie. Catherine Hilliard, please.
Okay, I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's a great discussion, except I don't know what a 360 is. Can somebody tell me?
A 360 review includes supervisors, subordinates, self-evaluation, and then people that the employee interacts with inside and outside of the organization. And for the examples I gave for the executive officer would be chair and vice chair of each of our committees, being operations, advisory, technical, and citizens oversight. So you'll get for the executive officer, you'll get a fire chief viewpoint, you'll get a city manager viewpoint, you'll get some of the people who are on the ground practitioners viewpoint, and then citizen viewpoints through citizens oversight committee.
Thank you. Wow.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for the question. That's always good to ask. Let's see, Dennis Rodoni, please.
Thanks, Bruce. During the discussion today, I'm beginning to think that this is getting a bit complicated, and looking outward to our work plan starting pretty soon in a few months. I just wonder if the timing is right to have this happen right now, or should we try and postpone it to do something similar like this, a complete evaluation in the fall next year? Just throwing out that question. It seems like we're building a pretty complicated, costly process, and I'm kind of concerned about it sort of focus the attention away from our programs and our work program, which starts in just a few months. Anyways, I'm just throwing that out there, and being on TAM and RIN Transit, we often don't do evaluations every year for a variety of reasons. But for example, during COVID, we didn't do any evaluations. So it's not unlikely that you could extend this out to be a longer than 1 year review. But you also could consider compensation as a separate item if you wanted for the current time. But anyway, just a suggestion. I don't know what others think or the public thinks of this process, but it seems like it's getting pretty involved and pretty costly. And I guess my question is the timing right for us to be focusing on this?
Excellent question, Dennis. Very, very thoughtful. David Kimball, please, and then Catherine Donahue.
Yeah, Dennis's question kind of brought to the fore something that I've been thinking all the way through this. We just orchestrated a 360 review for our new fire chief. He'd been in the job 2 years, and we streamlined it in terms of 3 basic questions and then a development plan. And the questions were, what does George do well that he needs to do more of? What does George do that he needs to improve? What is George doing that he needs to stop? And a plan. And as I look at the answers that came from all levels of the organization, you could cross-reference those to all. I'm looking at my iPad where you've got the criteria that Mark put in our report. And the goal really is to develop an improvement program. And in the improvement program, we tied salary adjustments to hitting those goals. So the whole purpose of it was a thoughtful and supportive improvement program. If you've got enough of what does George do that he should quit doing, well, then you've got another problem. Shouldn't be developing an improvement program. You should be finding a new chief. So I think it covers a lot of bases. I know it's a bit radical, but I am on the Pacific Plate side of things, not the, so we'll just leave it at that. Just food for thought. And part of the reason that we liked it so well is George wants to use it for not only employees, but the volunteers, and it's streamlined enough that it's practical to think you might actually really do it on a frequent, on a you know, a schedule, if you will, annual or biannual. Okay, enough of that. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Let's see.
May I say just one quick thing? In my discussion, I should have mentioned this, that when I spoke with Jean yesterday about sort of her approach to this, whether or not she's the ultimate person to do it, but just as an example, she had something very similar to, I think, what you're describing, David, which is this, a narrower set of questions. I think she said she usually goes with about 5 to 7 questions at the most. So it makes it much more efficient, I believe. So that's just one reference point for you.
Megan, can you paraphrase what you just said? You said, are you saying that Jean has a modified, more simplified process for evaluation? Is that what you're basically stating?
Yes, just that there's, she suggested that rather than a lengthy set of criteria that are evaluated, that she usually tries to focus in on a narrower set of questions along the lines of what David had described. So that's one possibility for sort of, if the concern is that it's becoming a cumbersome process, it may be that the consultant who is chosen will have sort of a narrower or less detailed criteria for the evaluation that we could consider, or the executive committee could consider when they're deciding which consultant to choose.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, please.
At this point, sort of in the evening, can I make a suggestion that maybe we take this off for today, come pull in all the feedback that, together, maybe work with Jean, come back with a different, proposal. There isn't really an urgency or timing that we have to do this right now, today, and just bring it back a little bit later.
Thank you, Rachel. We're not getting to decisions here, but there's, let's see, with Dennis's comments and others. What I'd like to do is move the public, please.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, let's bring it back to the board for a little bit further discussion. There appears to be a consensus that we want to, that we're not going to conclude this business today, and that we want to commission staff support to look at this further. There've been a number of suggestions. I like that idea, and we are coming on 10 minutes to 5. We've got a long agenda ahead of us. So please, Sashi, please make your comments brief.
I think actually we do have consensus on what was in the staff report, but what we're questioning is the proposed review criteria and what would be in that. So I would suggest that we do proceed on the process of what's outlined in the staff report, and then the rest of it could be dealt with later. And I don't know that we have to couple those things. I think we can agree to the executive committee closed session and the board closed session, because it did seem like people were okay with that. It was really more the detailed criteria. So I would suggest we continue with that and just deal with that today.
Thank you, Sashi. Thanks for that summary. Catherine Hilliard, please.
I think that I would like to see it in the December meeting packet, and with all of the input that everybody has given, considered and reframed. I think it's a bit cumbersome the way it is now. But I do think, in fairness to Mark and everybody else, that we can't put it off forever. He's been working here for a year and some months, and he really needs to have an idea of how well he's doing, and also working at 3,000%. So, so can we do this? Can we synthesize what's been said and ask it be brought back next month?
So I'm hearing, are you proposing a motion, Catherine?
Yes. Yes.
I second that motion.
Motion, Catherine, to synthesize what we have and bring it back to the board next month. David Kimball seconded. Allison?
Bolinas Fire District,
Aye.
City of Mill Valley,
I would prefer that we just take care of it now, but I'll say aye to go along here.
City of Santa Fe,
Aye.
City of Larkspur,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Aye.
Inverness Fire District,
Aye.
Marinwood Community Services District,
Aye.
Muir Beach Community Services District,
Aye.
Novato Fire District,
Aye.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District,
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District,
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera,
Aye.
Town of Ross,
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo.
Aye.
The motion passes with 100%.
Thank you, board. We will get this cleaned up and done next month. So thank you so much, all. Let's move on to, we have item 9. We have Stephen Peters here, Fire Safe Marin. And let's see. A short report, Stephen, on Fire Safe Marin.
Yeah, hi, yes. Yeah, Rich is currently not available right now, so I would encourage anyone who wants to have any questions on our October report to direct them to Fire Safe Marin just in an email. I'm here to just do a quick closeout of the CHIBR program for 2021. In the interest of time, I'll keep this very brief, with the understanding that we are in the process of publishing a much more in-depth annual report. So Mark, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So in summary, we went to 3,793 houses. That is 4.7% of the houses within the JPA. That's up from 2.9% of houses within the JPA. We removed 14,653.5% or cubic yards of raw material, which translates into roughly 1,700 cubic yards of chipped material. Next slide, please. Just a quick shout out to the 2 contractors that we contracted with over the season. For the North, Central, and South districts, we contracted with Forrester and Krieger, and for the West District, we contracted with the Tree Man. So they both did great work. We had great reviews from the public, and overall, really were satisfied with the work they gave. And then next, the self-reported resident satisfaction survey last year for the 2020 season, we had an 89% 5-star review. That's up now to 98.7. So that's a significant improvement. We're going to continue to work towards getting closer to 100% 5-star reviews in the future. And finally, these are just a few of the positive feedback results that we got from our self-reported survey. More will be included in the annual report. And if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But like I said, there'll be a much more in-depth report coming out in the next few weeks.
Excellent. Thanks so much. What I'd like to do is to move to the Ops and the Advisory Technical Committee before we move to questions, please.
And that's going to be a simple one. I just want to let you all know that we are working to schedule an Advisory Technical Committee meeting and an Operations Committee meeting the week of December 13th.
Okay, thanks very much. So thank you, Stephen. Questions on these reports from the board?
Bruce, if I could just throw in really quick, our goal was to increase participation of parcels by 50% from last year's numbers, and we exceeded that goal. So I see that as a big success for us.
Thanks, Mark. No questions. Stephen, I have a question about these contracts are they're annual contracts. Is there an opportunity to get into longer term contracts, multi-year contracts, to kind of get infrastructure in place and assured? If something you thought about, something we could discuss in the future. There's certainly fiscal questions and policy questions, but we're going to be doing this for another 8 or 9 years.
I can actually cover that one, Stephen, if you like, and that is part of our procurement policy that we'll be bringing to the Finance Committee and then to the full board, is the establishment of a vendor list that could be multi-year.
Okay, we can talk about that in more detail at the Finance Committee then. Thank you very much. Other questions from the board? Wonderful. So let's go to the public for comment, please.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Wonderful, thanks. Any further thoughts from board or others? Okay, thanks, Stephen, so much for the incredible work you guys are doing. Let's move on to informational items. So the action items on this agenda, does staff have any information items for the board? Let's see.
I do have that report out from the Strategic Ad Hoc Subcommittee with a brief presentation if you would like me to present now.
So, Mark, you're saying that for item 10C, you have a short summary presentation, which is wonderful.
Correct.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we look forward to that. Yes, please.
All right, and so as we mentioned, we had our strategic ad hoc subcommittee working. We've had 3 meetings. The last meeting being in person, I would have to say that the value of the in-person meeting was so much better than it was when we were trying to have these in-depth conversations via Zoom. And it is time to reflect and evaluate and strategize how we can make sure that we successfully implement our work plans and meet the goals of Measure C. So one of the first things that we talked about was taking a step from work that staff had compiled from a strategic meeting that we had offsite, staff being Ann and I and all of our awesome contractors that we have working for us. And as we engage in these conversations, one of the biggest threats that came up is actually not being able to succeed in our mission of the MWPA due to MWPA capacity or our member agency capacity constraints. And then one of the big questions we need to answer as the MWPA at the board, at the operations committee, advisory technical committee is, are we a funding agency similar to TAM, or are we an implementing agency? Or are we designed to be a little bit of both? And I would argue we are a little bit of both. I'm going to start at the bottom of this table. The community level wildfire prevention mitigation, that is clear that the MWPA is a funding agency. That is a straight pass through to our member agencies. Defensible space evaluations and home hardening. Currently, we are a funding agency in this. However, it was drawn up that actually for member agencies to have that as a pass through, they actually have to notify the MWPA on an annual basis that they want it to be a pass through, and not have MWPA provide those services. So by design in the writing of the JPA, right in that category right there, you see that we were both meant to be a funding and an implementation. And then when it comes to our core mission, it was really designed that the MWPA would provide the actual implementation work for the member agencies without increasing the workload of those agencies. They get the benefit of the work, but not having to carry the load on that. So we're 1.5 years. We have made a ton of progress, passing Measure 3, obviously a huge feat, creating the organization, building the work plan, starting multiple core projects, distributing funds, this all while we were designing the organization. And then what we're finding is that project completion is at times difficult. Member agencies are trying to manage with their current staffing or increased staffing because MWPA doesn't have the staff to support. And I'm going to use the city of Santa Fe as an example and Kate Anderson. Kate Anderson has her own job duties that she has at Santa Fe Fire. However, she's been having to put those duties aside and implement core projects within the city of Santa Fe. How this is going is that and after the work plan is created and the work plan is being created as designed with the member agency bottom up and the Panorama team do the environmental compliance, and then we pass that off to Santa Fe Fire. Kate is having to go through Santa Fe's purchasing and procurement processes, get a vendor, get them on contract, go and perform the project that she has to give them the in brief. She has to make sure that they're doing the right work, going in on regular check-ins, making sure that they're staying within the work parameters, and then close out the project. Vendor invoices Santa Fe pays, then Santa Fe turns around and sends an invoice to the MWPA to pay. So not necessarily the most efficient process. And we're looking at duplication of efforts. And potentially, if member agencies use MWPA funding to increase staffing, we might even start increasing duplicate staffing to implement similar projects. I'm a big fan of decentralized work until centralization creates efficiencies. And some of this is starting to create project delay and community frustrations. So what does success look like? Well, we build our projects based on the 5 MWPA goals. We complete our environmental compliance, remove obstacles to project implementation, and we complete the projects. And then we measure them against the metrics that we establish. So maybe we need to look at, well, our roles now and potentially redefining our roles. Right now, the MWPA is a contributor for the building the work plan. It'll continue to be a contributor as what we're proposing. The work plan, we are owning the work plan, but the implementation of the work plan is going to our agencies. That would remain the same. The fund management, we are contributing to the agencies. They are then owning that work. Whereas what we're looking at is that we would continue to own the funds of the core, and then the agencies would contribute to that workload. CEQA, no changes. We are owning it for the core projects. Same now, here's where the switch is for the implementation. Instead of being a contributor to the implementation, we are looking that MWPA could own the implementation so that that burden is taken off of our member agencies. But I'll discuss in a little bit how there could be a little bit of a hybrid there that might make a lot of sense. And then for the local mitigation projects, we stay the same. And so option one that we have is our current approach. Agencies that have a robust staff, they're working hard. It's been an increased burden on them, but they have been somewhat semi-autonomous. However, our smaller agencies, they don't have the funding that's coming to them from the MWPA to be able to increase that staff, and they're struggling. And I've had multiple agencies reach out to me and ask me, when is MWPA going to be able to start stepping up and implementing the core projects rather than us trying to implement it? Option two is for agencies to use the revenue in order to increase project staff, because we need to be lean. We need our money to go towards our projects. However, these projects don't happen by themselves, and there is staff that has to implement these projects. And so perhaps some of the agencies that are receiving larger funding can support that by increasing staff through MWPA funding. But again, smaller agencies may struggle in doing that, and maybe there could be a cooperative between member agencies. Maybe the Ross Valley agencies can decide that one agency is going to employ somebody that would manage these core projects, but then there has to be one agency that acts as the fiduciary agent. There has to be procurement processes, and then we get in that back and forth. I'm going to throw out an option 2.5, and that is perhaps some of the agencies continue to manage their core projects, but other agencies say, you know what, we want the MWPA to centralize. And then option 3 would be a full centralization of services for the core projects, create efficiencies within MWPA so that people who are specialized in evac route clearings within the MWPA staff, they're the ones that are managing all the evac route clearing projects throughout the jurisdiction. So our recommendation is to build MWPA's organizational capacity to implement the work plan, respond to the request or need of our member agencies. And we have a rough draft that we've been working with at the Strategic Ad Hoc Subcommittee for a staffing plan. But there's still a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of data that we need to compile for that staffing plan to be vetted with the board, because there's still too many unanswered questions in there. But the Strategic Ad Hoc Subcommittee just wanted to give the board an update of the direction that we're starting to head. And the Strategic Ad Hoc Subcommittee also made a recommendation to me through the spending authorities that are already allowed to bring on some temporary contract employees to help with the bandwidth, and so that we can start becoming more efficient immediately. And so on Monday of this week, Gene Bonander and I met with RGS, which is a firm that provides temporary support. And we're looking at 2 20-hour-a-week personnel, one that could focus on human resources and finance, and look at that proposed staffing plan and really dig in and give us those details that we need in order to evaluate that staffing plan. And then someone to help offload some of the administrative tasks that Ann and I have been doing, and also help establish a vendor list so that we can start getting vendors on contract quicker and start getting to the work quicker. So the Strategic Ad Hoc will continue to look in the mirror, review, and evaluate our goals and objectives, make sure we're doing what we need to do. But remember, there will be a finite endpoint for the ad hoc subcommittee because they are an ad hoc subcommittee. We will bring a full proposal with all of the fiscal ramifications to the full board. We'll be reviewing the proposals with operations and advisory technical committees, and that's one we are proposing to bring that to them in December at those meetings that I discussed that we were going to schedule. And with that, we have the question of what else? And I'll stop the screen share.
Thanks, Mark. I just want to say that an astounding amount of work has been done. There is a lot of work in progress. And rather than dig into this deeply, I would really suggest that directors communicate with Mark any questions, comments, or concerns. There's no proposal right now, but the executive, the team here, maybe I would first ask for comments from the team that supported Mark, the strategic ad hoc, just maybe to support or summarize. Gabe, Rachel, Catherine, who am I missing? Sashi, before we take questions, please. This is a work in progress. The bottom line is we're not getting the work done on the ground, and things need to change. And we polled, in essence, Rachel, Gabe, and others put some great thought together, but the need, Mark is commissioned to work with each member agency and ask them, how's it going? What do you need? And some don't need much, others going to need a whole lot. And it's basically commissioning Mark to work with the ATC and to come forth with a staffing plan that gets us to implementation. If we can't implement, we have done nothing. So I don't want, what I really want to say is let's not dig into this deeply, but I don't know, Gabe, Rachel, others, please, work in progress. Gabe, please.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. And Mark, a great job. I just want to say to the board as a whole, part of what an ad hoc committee does is spare you the details. But what's really important here, two things to outline, which have many details within them. I think Mark has essentially done what a good executive does, which is take an awful lot of information and present you with three options. And I think that's the focal point. So understand that we're still developing as an organization, and the extent to which we balance funding and implementation and 1099s and W-2s, this will determine our success. So I encourage Mark, you did a great job. And if you can continue to not give us information, it's not the what, it's the so what. What do we do now? What are the options? And then I really applaud the RGB piece, because just another small detail for the board. Mark is spending hours putting together these staff reports. His time is way too valuable. And I said, if I were running a company, I'd call Robert Half today and get a temp tomorrow to do like 20 hours of work. I think Mark has delivered on that. Kudos and thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Rachel or Catherine, others on the committee first. David. Yes,
yeah,
David.
I wanted to just add on to what Gabe said. Really, for a 17-member board, I see the ad hoc committee as doing quite a bit of background work that can then be brought to the full board for consideration and discussion and debate and refinement. Right. So I think anyway, so that, and the other thing I would say is we need shovel-ready projects. And to be shovel ready, you've got to do the planning and the analysis and everything that goes behind that. And we clearly are getting organized to do that. So I just add those comments in. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, David. And any other committee members want to make a comment? Thanks, committee members, for all the work that you did. Oh, Catherine, yes, please.
It's a privilege to work on that committee. We really poured over this very deeply for hours, and I support what Gabe said, what David says. I mean, we come at this with, we want to show our constituents that we are going to do something beneficial and we're going to do it now. And it clearly points to, I think, what Gabe said, that the impediment is not enough staff. And I know that all of us are fiscally responsible as we can possibly be, but it's gotta, we're way under what we said we would spend. It's gotta be giving Mark, and I also want to give credit to Anne, the amount of time they spend. So what happens in, you not only have to do all this work, but you're also the public facing people. So they call you and ask you questions. And so your to-do list becomes your to-didn't list because you had to take care of what the public is asking you. We just need more staff. But anyway, thank you so much for letting me say that. And our committee members are really doing a tremendous job. You're doing a tremendous job, Bruce, in getting all these added opinions put together. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Sashi, please.
Thank you. I love the framework you put together. I think it was, really thoughtful. I can tell that there was a lot of work put into it. I've got a couple questions. One is I'd love for, as you're considering this implementation versus funding kind of procedure, what will we do if there's some sort of conflict when work occurs within a member jurisdiction, or how would we kind of make sure that coordination is happening with an MWPA work crew versus when work is being done in a member jurisdiction. And then the other question I'd love for the committee to present back as you're developing the staffing plan. It's going to be a big difference for us because as Catherine and others have noted, that we have been working with kind of a skeleton crew and we do need more staff, but there is going to be a little bit of, it'll be a very different world to look at what a fully staffed up organization looks like. And so kind of having a sense of, as you're developing that staffing plan, of what those costs are and what the timing of how that's going to scale up is, so that we as the board can kind of get more attuned to how we should be viewing this. And then and also that should tie into the metrics to the overhead. So that I just wanted to have those questions be in the pool of consideration.
Okay, I do want to reiterate that we're not making any decisions right now, and that I would suggest that each board member communicate directly with Mark and Ann. Your questions or concerns, this is work in progress. It's in the formative stage. We know that we need an implementation team. What the exact staffing is and all those details have yet to be worked out. So Rachel, please. Rachel was on the team and she actually helped get things well organized for us that day. So Rachel, please.
I think the one thing that helped our conversation was really focusing on what is the problem we're trying to solve. And I think as the conversation continues at the ops committee and the technical and all the other advisory committees, that if people come forward and really try to be succinct in terms of identifying what is the problem we're trying to solve, that helps us to really narrow down what type of solutions we need to come up with. And that was really where, because we were spinning for a little bit, and until we got focused on what is the problem, and then we all narrowed down what is that problem. And then it became fairly straightforward. So I think as we continue the conversation, we need to make sure that as we're looking through stuff, what is that problem? And so hopefully the other committee groups will contribute and either validate or add on what other problems we need to look at, and problems in a good way. If we don't address them now, then they become real problems.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks so much. Let's see. I think it's really timely, Mark, to thank you, to thank the strategic ad hoc team, and basically let's just acknowledge that this is a work in progress, and you'll be hearing more next month. But we are here to solve that problem, which is we have difficulty getting implementation, and if we don't implement, what have we done? And it's Mark and Ann are being tasked to build that out for us. What does that implementation team look like, and all the details? So. I'd really like to move on with your consent to the next item, is that okay with you all?
Bruce, would you like to go to public comment for this item now, or wait
Well,
for?
My question is, do we need public comment on an informational item?
Because there was more discussion about this one, we usually do take it on these items that there's been input from the board rather than just taking it in.
So do we need public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, please. Yes, absolutely. Allison.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members.
Please.
And there is no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Board, we've had good discussions. Can we just all agree that we've commissioned this team to continue the work and bring it back to us all for further deliberations and decisions? Thank you all. Let's move on. Gosh, is Danny Franco's here.
We have Danny Franco in the room.
Mark, do you want to introduce him?
My pleasure. Danny Franco is an amazing individual, and I'm not to set too high of a bar for you, Danny, before you talk to our board, but he's been doing amazing work with the Parks Conservancy, creating a interactive and comprehensive fuels map. It's a pretty incredible document, pretty incredible tool. In fact, we have people considering the work that he has done the gold standard. So with that high bar I set for you, Danny, it's all yours, bud.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the invitation. I'm going to share some slides. How much time you guys want me to take? Not too much, right?
Trim it down there, Danny.
I'll trim it down, and I'll try to keep it at a high level, appropriate for a board. But I have a fair amount of slides, but I'm just going to blow through them quickly. And I just invite you all to stop me and ask questions, or I'll leave some time at the end to ask some questions. I want to share a little bit of context about the work that Mark highlighted in the introduction. This is nested in part of what we're calling the Marin Regional Forest Health Strategy for Public Lands. So I work for the Parks Conservancy. One TAM is an initiative of the Parks Conservancy and the 4 land managing agencies on Mount Tamalpais. I'm sure you're all familiar, but I'm happy to provide additional background about One TAM if that's needed. In 2016, the One TAM Collaborative issued a report called Measuring the Health of the Mountain. This has become a foundational document for a lot of the work that has happened since. Given this board's appetite for metrics, I think you can appreciate that this was a broad scale effort to bring together the scientific community and land managers and expertise within the land managing agencies in Marin and statewide to use data to assess the health of the natural resources on Mount Tamalpais. Defining health is complicated. We worked with again metrics to measure the health of key ecological indicators. So not every single plant species, not every single wildlife species, but key indicators within the broad community of natural resources across Mount Tamalpais. Some key takeaways that are important to understand as background for my work currently is that, and this is something that is not going to be news to MWPA, conditions necessitate management, right? These forests face multiple ecological stressors. You know them: invasive species, plant disease, drought stress, degradation from past land use, changed wildfire regimes. Indicators in some cases point to a trajectory for these forest communities that can still be improved, but action is needed, right? This report also identified data gaps. And one of the big data gaps was, as Mark mentioned in his introduction to me, a comprehensive spatial data set that characterizes vegetation and other important land cover variables across the landscape. And that's when this all got handed to me. Just real quickly on our funding, in case you're interested, this comes from CCI funds, state cap and trade dollars, down through the Natural Resources Agency, which has a program called the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program, all the way to the California State Coastal Conservancy, of which the One TAM Collaborative is the sub-grantee. So these are cap and trade dollars really intended to promote planning and analysis and implementation of, greenhouse gas reduction, improve sequestration, address the wildfire risk at the statewide scale, right? So this is a strategic planning effort. So, we're focused on planning and analysis, right, to support our land managing agency partners in identifying opportunities for stewardship and also, the multi-benefit outcomes of stewardship and fuels reduction. I won't bore you with all of the specifics, but I'll just highlight that, we started with the basics of developing a shared definition of resiliency, and then kind of to what Mark was highlighting, we developed geospatial models to identify areas of stress, disease, disturbance, right? So that we can find these areas across the vast landscape of Marin County that would benefit from stewardship and management. We are going to recommend approaches to projects, treatment options that include best management practices from deep dives into literature and interviews with experts, compliance pathways for projects. Of course, the resource protection is a big one in Marin. As you all know, we've been working with Marin Water. They have work happening up on Tam Watershed that you all may be aware of, and that's been informing our strategy. strategy. We combine all this analysis, and this is sort of where we're at in the process, into a series of recommendations and data sets that our land managers can use to coordinate a work approach across jurisdictional boundaries. And of course, we're performing in community engagement. That's what I'm doing right now with you all. The one-TAM partners on this working group delivering this strategy are primarily the natural resource managers and scientists. We have a series of technical advisors that sit with the working group. Ann Krelock has been kind enough to join us to represent MWPA. It's been a really great journey over the last few years with this working group. Again, the focus of this strategic planning effort is on multi-benefit approaches to increasing forest health and resiliency in the wildlands while complementing countywide fuels reduction efforts. This is what you all do. You're doing defensible space, home hardening, evacuation routes, work in the WUI. That Venn diagram overlaps because we're sharing the data generated through this effort with your guys' consultants, your contractors, with Panorama, with the folks doing land tender. We're here to supply data and information that we're generating as part of this work to MWPA so that we can all kind of come together with the community to identify these opportunities for resource enhancement and community protection from wildfire. Very quickly, last year, we sort of got through our framework, conceptual stuff. We started our community engagement despite the COVID hurdle, the big C. Now, this year we've really been crunching the GIS models, and I have a few slides that will kind of if you want to see figures to show you how we're sort of assessing forest health at landscape scale. Again, we've been engaging with a panel of technical experts to strengthen these deliverables, and we're just now beginning the process of identifying priority areas for stewardship and management. So where do these disease and forest health models overlap with, critical infrastructure resources, or just high value forest areas that we want to conserve? Think Muir Woods, for example. So next year we're going to integrate all of this. We have to write it up. We want to continue the community engagement and outreach. This is going to be a public document that will live on the one-TAM website. So it'll have an executive summary. This is pretty deep into my presentation. I'm almost done, Bruce, but just basically defining forest health is complicated. And so what we've done is work with, experts to map out, I love this because this is just totally confusing. This is our conceptual framework of forest health for coast redwood. But really what this allows us to do is identify those metrics that we want to be able to measure to assess forest health at landscape scale and identify areas that can benefit from this approach to fuels reduction and stewardship, right? At one-TAM, where we approach everything through the lens of stewardship, but we believe that there can be, and I know you guys do too, this multi-benefit approach to fuels reduction and forest revitalization. So here's some figures, right? This is the countywide fine scale vegetation map. I'll pass these slides off to Mark via email, and he can share them with you. There's links in the slides to access the data. This is just all of the forest lands in Marin shown in our fine scale vegetation map. Again, countywide. It maps 34 different types of forest communities in Marin County. Beyond locating those forest stands, we have been working through the forest health strategy to enhance this vegetation map with information, disease models like the presence of mortality in tree canopy, which may be the result of sudden oak death or pitch pine canker disease. But you see that these forested polygons, we can now look at and highlight. The ones in red have higher percentage of standing dead. Again, this is about identifying opportunities on the ground for a restorative approach to fuels reduction. We can further use LiDAR data to understand the dynamics in the under and overstory of forested areas, which is a really powerful tool for assessing forest structure and conditions at landscape scale. Of course, if we look at a fire history map of Marin, and we've been working with an amazing historical ecologist to further improve the record and mapping of historical fires in Marin County, which is something we will certainly be passing off to you folks to use in your analysis and project planning. But areas that are likely to burn, that haven't burned in a long time, plus mortality equals opportunities to do stewardship on the ground that can complement efforts that MWPA is doing. Just a quick, this is for you, Bruce, so you can get mad at me for delaying, because I knew you'd ask. This is a proposal that was just submitted to NASA today to do near real-time monitoring of drought conditions in forests and shrublands. I won't go through everything. This is just the goal of this is to create a dynamic web map that can show weekly. This is leveraging satellite data from NASA and existing analysis from USDA to bring it to Marin and put it in a scale that's useful and actionable, both from a vegetation management perspective, but also from a fuel moisture perspective for folks like yourselves and the land managing agencies. So we can work with these folks with NASA funding, if we get it, knock on wood, to really quantify areas of drought stress across the landscape, right? So what this example shows is pockets of drought stressed vegetation, in Mill Valley, in the vegetated communities that are represented in this first figure, are then highlighted pixels of where you have increased areas of loss in vigor between two comparative dates. So a really powerful tool that, again, we submitted today, Bruce. I'm hoping that NASA gets back to us soon. Future work is going to be complete our health assessment, wrap all this up, put it into the public domain, provide it to our partners so that they can advance projects. And some of this is already happening. You may know that with support from 1TAN and the Parks Conservancy, Marin Water has successfully received a CAL FIRE Forest Health Grant for $3.5 million and a Coastal Conservancy grant for an additional $1 million. Part of that includes partnership with Marin County Parklands. So we're sort of putting the concepts and the strategy into play in parallel with the development of all the good data products. So with that, I'll shut up. And thanks for your attention.
Danny, it's phenomenal work. What you're doing is so phenomenal, so relevant, and we're really blessed to have you and your team here present doing the work. So thank you. Question from the board at this moment. Any question for Danny from the board? Catherine, please.
Just
Catherine,
one. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Where can we, Mark, can we get a copy of these slides? Can we get these? I mean, this is amazing. Thank you so much.
Happy to share these, absolutely. And happy to give this presentation to you again in a slower or more open format, or to you and maybe some of your stakeholders or constituencies, because I think people need to know about this work. I'm really proud of this work. And so yeah, absolutely, we'll share.
Thanks.
The slide deck will be attached as an official record of our meeting, and then I'll make sure that you guys also get links to that.
It's fantastic, Danny. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all for the work you do.
I just want to make the statement that, there is a sentiment in some circles that we just, let things be and everything's going to be fine. But, what Danny is essentially laying out is that there are numerous stressors in the environment, drought, insect disease, who name it. And, we have inserted ourselves, we've moved into the forest, and those things that are occurring all around us, it's not just wildfire hazard, but, there are other stressors that have an effect. And so that there are places where we should accelerate our investment, that we might moderate what we do or modify, or anyway, this work is incredible, Danny, and we're really blessed to have this partnership, and Mark and the ATC and Ops having this information to make their project level decisions. It's just going to make make a big difference on the landscape. So I just want to thank you so much for the incredible work you're doing.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for the acknowledgement to Mark and Ann for all of those two people have a lot of energy, and this board's lucky to have them. So it's a pleasure working with those two in particular, and you as well, Bruce. I'll give you a shout out too. And yeah, I look forward to completing this work and seeing it get used to advance cross-jurisdictional projects that can have these multiple benefits that we talked about. So I'm going to get back to it.
Thanks so much. So we want to go to the public here quickly for comment on the item.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
So bring back to the board, any, closing comments? I'm just seeing, heads nodding, Danny, Mark, and integrate this into the work that we do is going to make our product so much more effective and so much more timely. And we have science here behind us. This isn't just conjecture, this isn't theory, real land-based data to do real land-based treatments. So I think we're just blessed to have this resource. So thanks, man.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I don't know if Danny knows how to say no. Every time we approach him and ask him for something and ask him for information, ask him to do something, his answer is always yes.
Yeah. Go, Danny, go.
It's my pleasure. I'm a fan of y'all's work and I look forward to working with you more.
Nice.
Okay. Thanks. Let's move on to item 11, which is, thank you, Danny. Board members have any requests for future agenda items, please? David.
I don't have a future item, but I wanted to make an announcement before you close the meeting out, if you don't mind.
Go.
You want me to do it now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, in an effort to practice surprise prevention, some of you may have noticed in the appointing Catherine to the Finance Committee that my last board meeting in Bolinas Fire will be in December. And last night in our board meeting, I passed my 14th anniversary being on that board and had been the disaster coordinator for Bolinas for 5 years prior to that. And I was ready to leave earlier, but we had a fire chief who unexpectedly announced she was retiring, and she was a very difficult act to follow. So I wanted to stay on to help that transition to our new fire chief, who we got so lucky. But also, I was really taken by the MWPA and the opportunity to be part of standing it up was something that I just couldn't say no to. So I kind of came to the conclusion that life's arbitrary dates of every 4 years didn't line up with what the community, what the events in the community are. So I just wanted to say that I've been humbled and honored, to work with you all. And it's been a really terrific, the ethics and the moral standard that you all hold in your commitment to serving the community first is really terrific. And anyway, so I just wanted to say that, and there you go. So I didn't want to go through the December meeting, and maybe some people would have missed that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just say, David, personally, I value your contribution so much. When I wrote my letter of intent and interest in being president and identified the issues that I thought the board needed to address in the first year, guess who called me? David Kimball. Who are you? What? And David called me to basically just talk about stuff and talk about the realities of the smaller districts and what his issues and concerns were. And your contributions, David, are just phenomenal. So this is too soon for goodbye. And we have some ad hoc work to do in the interim, but here, go get that furniture built, my friend.
And I've got a little here, Catherine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, David, I just hope that I'm going to be able to get into your shoes on the Finance Committee from Inverness. As you know, West Marin is our treasure. So I'm hoping that we can chat about things and everything for all of our wonderful ventures together.
Yeah, of course, don't be bashful.
Oh, thank you.
I see another hand up, Catherine.
I want to say, shucks, you can't do this. I don't accept your resignation. I'm so sorry. I served with you on the Finance Committee and you brought us back to reality. You gave us the scope that we needed. You are an amazing person with such an incredibly rounded background that can really contribute. And you were a friend and a mentor, and I'm not letting our friendship go. So if we do things, I'm going to call you up and say, what do you think about this? And so even though you may not be a full member of the board, You're on my board. You're my support. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've come to the moment for adjournment. Let's adjourn the meeting. It is 5:36 PM, November 18th. Next meeting to be on December 16th. And so I wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving and look forward to commuting here again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All of you.